I remember watching ER, and they killed off my favorite doctor, who was one of the more hated characters on the show. A helicopter hunted him to death. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, and I told my wife at the time, I said, I'll never watch it again. And she laughed and said, yeah, you will. I never did. There are moments on a show when I say, no, that's it. It's funny how, even with movies, there are moments that, to me, seem to just cross a line. When I heard they were bringing in Negan, and I heard, obviously, rumors over who he'd killed in the comics and what he'd done, I thought, I can't, I can't see them doing that on the show. I couldn't see them doing it. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. It's still on. I've turned it off. I waited all summer to find out who he killed off, and I thought, well, it'll probably be an insert character name here. And I figured they'll show the first hit, and the rest will be off screen. Because they don't need to go overboard with this. They did. The person who was the victim, I enjoyed watching. And I felt that the scene that they created, I don't know. It's funny because I've got videos I've done lately where I watch horror movies, and I talk about horror movies, and I talk about zombie movies in particular. You expect everybody in a zombie movie to die, and you're okay with that. I was not okay with this. And I don't know why, but I know there's a feeling I get where I'm watching a show sometimes, and I go, this is the dividing line. I can't continue. Your journey will continue without me as a viewer, and nobody's going to care. I don't have delusions of grandeur. I don't believe that my viewership makes or breaks a show. If it did, there'd be 10 seasons of Reaper and no seasons of Gossip Girl. But it's not a fair world. And I don't bring Reaper up as a casual thing. I bring it up because it was a very good show. And I think you can tell a very good story without brutalizing characters people care about. And it's not the first time that The Walking Dead's done it, but it is the most brutal sequence I've seen on the show. And I felt horrified. And I'm sure there are people who are going to say, well, that's what you're supposed to feel. That's what the show is meant to do, that, and that's fine. And if you choose to watch the show from this day forward, I won't make any statement about, somebody else watching and say, oh, there's something wrong with you. No, because it's everybody's choice what they do or don't watch. But for me, tonight's episode took that line and just burned it. Just burned that line absolutely to the ground and wiped it out. So I'm out. And it's funny because Fear the Walking Dead, while it's driven me nuts with its combination of boredom and stupid decisions, hasn't made me feel this way in the first 2 seasons. And they've had characters killed off. They've had family members killed off on the show. And they've had strange twists, and they've had villains. But I feel that it's almost as if with The Walking Dead, they went, okay, the governor did this, so we have to ramp it up. And we have to ramp it up. And ramp it up. And now they've got Negan, and you got to ramp it up even more. And I don't think you need to ramp it up. I don't. I personally feel that what they did in this episode was unnecessary on the level they did it. And again, I'm not spoiling anything. I mean, if you want to find the spoilers, they're out there. And if you care, you're probably watching the show and you're not watching me. But I've talked about The Walking Dead on this show before. I wasn't anxious to find out all summer. I felt that waiting until halfway into the episode to tell us what happened was cheap. And all these flashbacks of, oh, Rick's thinking of so-and-so, so-and-so, thinking of it. I'm like, okay, so they're not dead. They're not dead because he's thinking of them. But there were also just logistical stupidities in this by Negan, where I'm like, okay, no. I don't know. I feel like Negan in that situation, knowing what he's dealing with, would have just wiped out the group. All gone. And before you type, I know there's complications. I've read the comic book spoilers. I know there's complications in the relationship between Negan and Rick, and Carl and all that stuff, and all those interpersonal relationships. I get it, but I'm out. The Walking Dead, which has been a good show, but I have found over the last 2 seasons has relied more on shock than good writing. I think of last season, there were a few deaths that I thought were over the top and shocking just for the sake of being shocking and not necessarily to drive the storyline forward. And when you have a series that's in its 7th season that's based on a zombie apocalypse, you're going to run out of shocks. And that's where they're at right now. Because I watched that and I'm like, I can't. I felt sick. And I don't, it's like, well, that's the way a show's supposed to make you feel. Well, it felt like Devil's Rejects. I did a video earlier where I talked about my feeling with horror movies, and to me, tonight's Walking Dead gave me that same feeling as Devil's Rejects. Just, ugh. And I probably could have handled it if I knew that Negan's comeuppance was going to end up happening in the next 10 minutes, 10 weeks, 2 years, but there's no guarantee there will be one for him. And I just found myself feeling kind of really repulsed by the show. And again, it's that fine line between being entertained and repulsed, and horror rides that line. And for me, I'm out. I can't do it. And again, I won't spoil it for anybody, because if you haven't seen it, then you haven't seen it. But it just didn't make me feel good. I wasn't a happy camper watching it. So yeah, I just felt I'd post a video just to get that out there, just so that's been said. And yuck. Waited all summer for that, huh? It's like the show takes all of these personal relationships and just throws them out the window for shock value. And it's like it takes all these storylines and just destroys them. And there's one character in particular, I looked at that and I thought, how could they go on? Like, you're continually brutalizing this character's life. How could they get it? And if you've watched, the spoiler, you know what I'm talking about, where it just seems like one after the other, like just it's constant. And I had a hard enough time with another senseless death from, I think it was a season and a half ago now, which was Emily Kinney. When they killed her off, I was like, what? And it was senseless and pointless. Remember Tasha Yar dying in Star Trek The Next Generation when the tar monster gets her? It feels like there's a lot of tar monster deaths in Walking Dead, where they're just out of nowhere, they're pointless, and they don't really advance the storyline. How long did Maggie mourn her sister? How many times was it mentioned after? 3? Was it mentioned 3 times? 2 times? Did they mourn her for an episode and then they move on with their lives? And you can say, well, it's the apocalypse, of course. No, not when it's close family. That's not you know, of course, then they just do the skip forwards, and to me, the fast forwards are kind of a cheat too. But yeah. So, anyways, I'm done. Walking Dead is no longer on my list of shows to watch. If you enjoy it, awesome, amazing, fantastic. I salute you for your fortitude sticking with the show. But in terms of who was killed off, my interest in the show is kind of killed off. I will keep my Lauren Cohan poster on the wall from Maggie of The Walking Dead, because it's Maggie from The Walking Dead, and with memories of better times when it was just most of her um, loved ones that are dead. Um, but I just really, I found, so there's a spoiler, Maggie doesn't die, which I was actually concerned with. And then when they revealed who it was, I was like, oh, really? Why? I was starting to like that. It's like, reminds me of Andrea. I really hated Andrea. I thought she was useless. And the only time she fired a gun and hit anything, she shot Daryl. And it's like, oh my god. So they finally made her useful, and then they killed her off. And it's like, okay, so I'm being manipulated here to root for a character just so they can kill her in the next scene. And pointlessly, just something stupid and pointless killed her. And it's like, why? And again, like Emily Kinney's character, just dead. Why? I don't find that does anything for me. It would be like watching, like, you know, I've got all these horror movies here that I've been talking about. It'd be like watching a Halloween movie, and, you know, Michael Myers is in the movie, and then a person kills themselves with the blender. Like, well, why did that happen? Shock value. But that's not, that doesn't match the rest of, that's, is the blender evil? Nope. They write the blender out in the next scene, so there's no point in that blender killing that character. I would like to see how a blender gets written out, though. I'd like to see a blender as an actual character in a horror movie. Let's make it happen. Blender Mania. We'll just, you know, people just randomly fall into a blender. It might be a fun movie. We'll do it. We'll make it happen, and it'll make more sense than tonight's episode, because I just didn't, I don't. I can't. I'm done. I'm out. It's over. It's done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit dislike if you're a Walking Dead fan, because I can't do it. I just can't. A show that started out with all this heart and community and this feeling of building towards something has just turned into this dark, dreary, pointless existence. There's no point. Everybody's gonna die, except for 3 or 4 core characters. And, you know, it's the Rick, Carl, I was gonna say Coral, Rick, Carl, Michonne, Rick, Carl, Michonne, and Daryl show. And those are the 4. And anybody outside the 4, they can go at any time. And I feel like those 4 are the ones that are going to survive, and everybody else is interchangeable. And I don't care anymore. Anyways, I just figured I would post this and take on probably a lot of heat from people, but that's okay, because the difference of opinion is allowed when it comes to television shows. And I feel the show peaked about 3 years ago, and it's just gone downhill. It's gone downhill since the first confrontation with the governor. Once the governor was kind of out roaming the countryside and trying to reclaim himself and build up a new army, it just kind of lost something. And I feel like the first, you know, the season at the prison, and when they were dealing with Woodbury, and Andrea was kind of playing both sides, that was the most entertaining the show was. That was the best the show was, and everything since then has just kind of gone downhill. That's my own personal opinion. I will look forward to hearing about why I'm wrong in the comments section.